Welcome to the PJ Show. Let's rock and roll. Rock and roll. Come on, everybody. Let's lose control. Brad and John never wants to follow. Yeah, ready for the ride. It's the PJ Show. PJ Show.
It's a Meltdown Tuesday. We'll call it a Meltdown Tuesday. How's that, John?
Oh, it's fantastic, Brad.
I had a lunch. I'm not going to name drop, and hopefully I'll be able to talk about this tomorrow. I had a lunch scheduled with an interesting guy on Thursday, okay? And he contacted me yesterday and said he can't do Thursday. Can we do next Tuesday? Well, just this morning as we were going through the show, and I was trying to fix everything while I'm on the air, he contacted me and says, can we do today instead? And I said, yes. And I've already talked to him on the phone, and I'm going to essentially ask him if I can tell the story that he told me, because you will find it fascinating. And not only if I can tell the story on tomorrow's show, it will for sure be one of the featured posts on johncombest.com.
Oh, you think so? Can you give us a super, super, super vague hint as to what category in life this deals with?
Politics and people running for office.
Oh, nice, nice. And is he going to run against Bill Eigel for that spot, Brad?
I'm not going to say. I'm not going to say.
Is he going to install some I-3 fiber out to Franklin County and through the Westplex?
I'm not going to say. I'm not going to say. John.
That's fantastic.
Okay.
You know what, Brad? I would talk about it more, but I don't want to eliminate that topic from tomorrow. I don't want to eliminate that topic.
Okay, John. Remember, we talked about this crazy stuff. Was it last week, or I think it was last week, the psychiatrist was from Yale who came out and said, if you don't like the way somebody in your family voted, you should not invite them to your Thanksgiving, or you should ignore them at Thanksgiving.
That's my Aunt Lakeisha. We talked about her.
Okay.
I'm not invited to her Thanksgiving, Brad.
Here's an article which I found very interesting, okay? The headline is, sounds like a cult. Sociologist rips leftist calls to cut off Trump family members during the holidays. And I forgot about this. And essentially what it says is sociologists criticize calls on the left for Americans to cut off family members and other loved ones who voted for President-elect Donald Trump, saying such measures were extremely unhealthy for society. She says, I don't think that's a great piece of advice. I mean, it sounds like a cult. This is Brad Wilcox, a psychology professor and director of the National Marriage Project at the University of Virginia. And here's the interesting quote. I forgot about this. Cults often encourage people to cut off their family and friends just to kind of keep people within the cult, so I don't take that advice as worth following. That is exactly these cult leaders. They tell people, don't tell anybody what you're doing because you're going to get criticized. And essentially they tell you to cut yourself off from your family and friends, that you have found a new body of friends, a new family.
Yes. And isn't that one of the chief criticisms of Scientology as well? And I don't know enough about it to speak intelligently, but as I understand it, one of the tenets of Scientology is that you should surround yourself with people who, let's just say, subscribe to the same beliefs that you do. And if people don't, then they don't really have a key place in your life anymore.
Right. And see, maybe I'm the weirdest guy in the world, but I love to have discussions with people that do not think like I do. Not that I'm going to try to convince them. I always find it fascinating to find out how people are thinking, because of the fact that sometimes, I think to myself, that's an interesting angle. I never thought of that before. And maybe sort of reinvestigate my own thoughts and think, well, maybe I do have this wrong. But yet, when I read this, I thought to myself, I forgot about this, because this is the one thing that they always talk about, that when people become members of a cult, they essentially ostracize themselves from their friends and their family, because of the fact that the cult tells them they're going to try to talk you out of this. They're going to tell you that we're weird and we're some crazy weird organization, but they're the ones that are weird and crazy, and you're the one that's smart because you're with us. That's exactly what they do, right?
I think that this should be a topic at least played once in a while. If you go to godsquad.cloud, you should replace one of the beautiful songs that's very soothing and relaxing and leads you into prosperity, you should replace one of those songs, Brad, with your clip right there about not joining the cult.
Well, but to a certain extent, I won't say it on here. I was going to say something, but I get myself in trouble for saying that. But when you think about this, people are very tribal, okay? I mean, on so many different levels, okay?
Sure.
For example, if you get into, I kid about the fact that my high school reunion class, I had my high school reunion last year, and it was interesting because of the fact up to the reunion there were lots of people on the Facebook page and stuff like that. And one of the things that I've talked about this on the air before, that I thought to myself, okay, that's why I'm not going to retire, because the high point in their lives was they were taking pictures of themselves playing pickleball at Chesterfield Mall and then going over to Harpo's on Olive, which is, you know where Harpo's is?
Yeah, I can hit it with an Albert Pujols home run.
Okay, so you're that close to it, right? Okay. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, I don't want to do that. To me, that doesn't sound like any fun. Now, once again, if that's what you're into, if you like playing pickleball and then going and eating a burger and pounding down a few brewskis at Harpo's, hey, more power to you. But doesn't that sort of get to the point where you become sort of, myopic in your views because those people, you all went to high school with them, they all grew up in the same area? I mean,
but also, so I agree with you, Brad, but I do think this. I think that your desire to talk to people who have differing points of view, I think that's unique. And so for you to say, hey, don't people enjoy this? Shouldn't they like it? Well, no, because most people don't, Brad. I think I think assuming that other people want to have some sort of intellectual intercourse is very assumptive.
Which brings up another story I read yesterday, that this media expert was saying that part of the reason that the Democrats have really faltered is because they have stayed away from Fox News. He's essentially saying, hey, if you're smart, go on Fox. Go on these conservative talk shows. Call up Buck and Clay Travis or Travis Clay, whatever his name is. Call those guys up. Get on Sean Hannity's show. And the interesting thing about that is that you know darn well that our show doesn't have the cachet or whatever you want to call it of those national shows. But there are people that if I called up would say, well, you're doing like sort of conservative talk. Yeah, we're sort of doing that. Okay, I'm not going on your show. And it's to the point where it's like, okay, they've got an audience, and to the point where I get it that some shows that they may get beat up by the host, but, don't you think that you and I would give them a fair interview?
No, because I would say we're not having guests on our show because we're not some generic St. Louis talk show, and we should stop comparing ourselves to them. That's number one. Number two, to answer your question directly, of course you would do a great job. I couldn't ask them questions because we won't invest in the technology. Number three, Brad, well, since I'm done kicking you, I will point out the fact that, again, our friend Pete Mundo in Kansas City has the mayor of Kansas City on every week to get lectured / harangued by our friend Pete. And I don't mean lectured, but Pete asks really hard questions about, Mr. Mayor, what are you going to do about these shootings? Mr. Mayor, when are we going to have a plan for the Royals and the Chiefs? And Quinton Lucas comes on every week and takes a beating and gives his side of the story. And Brad, I listen to that, not being emotionally invested in Kansas City. And I'm like, oh, wow, like Quinton made some pretty good points there because he's not afraid of answering those questions.
Well, it was interesting because the political talk shows in St. Louis, and probably the biggest one is 97.1, they used to have, who was the president of the board of aldermen that got arrested and thrown in jail?
Lewis Reed. He was on there on part of the Reed Roundtable every week.
And he was always really good.
Really good.
And once again, they didn't throw him softballs. They asked him some pretty tough questions, and he was really good at making the responses, and he would give the background story. Well, the reason we didn't do that was because of this. You go, okay, I get it. Now, having said that, the mayor of Kansas City comes on Pete Mundo's show every week. Where's Tishaura Jones?
Yeah, a great point. Can you imagine her going on once a month on Mark Reardon's show? Or God forbid, Mark Cox's show?
But see, go back to the Katie Couric thing. Where she criticized Kamala Harris for not going on the talk shows with tough questioning hosts. Isn't it the same thing? isn't it the same thing? Maybe Tishaura Jones would sharpen her game if she would be on the show with Mark Cox in the morning, or Annie Fry, or even some of the other stations. You like the guy who's the wrestler dude that's up at
Mark Bland. Yeah,
you like Mark Bland. You like the guy on Tracy's station. What's the afternoon guy? Mr.
Ryan Haidt.
Ryan
those
Haidt.
guys.
I mean, and he's a pretty sharp interviewer. I've heard him do some interviews.
Absolutely, he is.
And to the point where I think when I've heard him sort of drill down with people, he's tough, but he's fair. Don't you think?
Absolutely, yeah. And that one of the reasons why I like listening to him is he's really good. Now, but Brad, here's my counter argument to that is, if I'm working for Tishaura, I say absolutely not. I want you to go on friendly shows. Like, nothing good can happen. Nothing good can happen by going on a Ryan Haidt show or going on Mark Bland's show. Nothing good can happen. Maybe Mark Bland's show, it would be okay. But like, nothing good can happen, Brad, because if you say something interesting, all you should care about are your voters in St. Louis City. And Brad, you are making the mistake of making an intellectual argument, which is Tishaura would be better. She would be sharper. She would answer questions better. If I'm working for her campaign, I'm saying you're doing 100% bought and paid for media that we're already buying advertising on, that we can lean on for favorable coverage. And we'll do 1 or 2 interviews with Alexis Zotos or somebody friendly, and to hell with the rest of them. We're going to spend all of our money on messaging that we can control. It would be political malpractice for one of Tishaura's advisors to tell her to go on Ryan Haidt show or go on 97.1 or go on any other station, Brad. They can't do it.
Okay, now here's something interesting as well, too, and we'll dovetail this into the Kamala Harris thing. All this stuff is coming out now because of the fact, and John knows this as well as I do, the FEC reports, the Federal Election Commission.
Yes.
When all these, the financial reports that have to be filed. Now it turns out that some of the people that she had, that Kamala had interviews with and things like that, I think Jesse Jackson, or was it Al Sharpton, they made donations to their organizations. In other words, they were paying to have these people.
Yes.
And the same thing with...
But Brad, they didn't write the check directly to them. They made it out to Harpo, Brad.
Right.
It's different.
Did you hear that their insiders are now saying that it wasn't $1 million that Kamala Harris campaign paid to Oprah?
It was 2.5, right?
$2.5 million.
Yeah, they got the number wrong. It was double and a half.
Right. And you read the FEC report, and $4 million in private jets, and they go through crazy little line items like I don't know what, $26,000 for Grubhub, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it's going like, okay, at least we had Ray Hartman, who was above board, and he said, yeah, I'm paying myself to be a candidate.
Yeah, he said, I got to make a living.
Right, I got it.
And good for Ray.
Right.
I mean, and the other thing is, that came out all before the election. That's not the reason why Ray lost, but good for Ray. I mean, sarcasm aside, good for Ray for being like, yeah, I got to make money. Of course I'm taking up salary.
Right. If you know what we're talking about, when Ray Hartman was going up against Ann Wagner, he actually was paying himself, what is it, $7,000 a month or something like that?
$5,500 a month. Yeah.
$5,500 a month. He was paying himself to be a candidate. I'm going like, okay, whatever. And see, to me, this is I'm going to get in trouble with my church going friends. I have one person in my life who's not in my life anymore because I made a comment about the fact that I think a lot of these churches are sort of money grubbing operations, and that person has not talked to me since. But there's a whole nother story behind that. There's this guy, and I think I've talked about this before. I believe his name is TaylorRansom, and he knows too much about the new charismatic church organizations, because he puts together these funny YouTube videos, and he does shorts, and he does reels and all these kind of things, and he pretends to be various people. And the latest one is he pretends to be the attorney to one of the big what do you want to call it? The new generation churches. What would be a good way?
Yeah, one of the mega churches, one of the Nickelback band churches.
Right, one of the Nickelback band churches. So he's always doing this thing where he's doing like a Bob Newhart kind of thing, where he walks into a a room or something like that, and he pretends he's having a conversation with the person, but yet the person isn't really there. He's just sort of filling in. And he's the attorney, and he walks in, he says, okay, well, let's get down to brass tacks. He says, I can't get the permit for the water park in the parking lot. The city won't give us the permit for the new water park in the parking lot, but we can put the water park on the roof of the church, and we won't need a permit for that because we've already got the permit for the church building, and it's going to be great because the building is in front of the parking lot, and you couldn't see the water park if we're in the parking lot, but if we put the water park on top of the church, we can see it from the interstate, and they'll bring more people in. And then he goes into the thing, and he says, yeah, and you know what about your son? Well, I got that taken care of, and the fact that, I get it that 19-year-olds shouldn't be out driving drunk, but, we can get that all taken care of, and you can hire your son to work in the sound booth for the church. And he goes through this whole thing. I'm thinking to myself, okay, how far from the truth is that?
It probably happens, yeah.
And to the point where I'm going like, okay, once again, I say this before. I've said this for years, and I know people are going to be mad at me when I say this. Remember the big deal? It was WWJD. Remember that?
Yeah, it's a mnemonic device to remember. It's a heuristic. It's a mental model. What would Jesus do?
What would Jesus do? Okay, I have a switch on that. Mine is WWJW, and that is where would Jesus worship? And I still say that Jesus, if he came back to planet Earth, and he may be here for all we know, but he wouldn't be at the fancy places. I think he'd be hanging out at the Greyhound bus station and the combination bus station / Metrolink terminal downtown across from the Enterprise Center. I think he'd be hanging out under the overpasses with the homeless people. I don't think he'd be hanging out at all the fancy schmancy churches. But that's just me. And am I a great theologian? No. I'm a guy who got his pastorship. Can you call it that? Actually, I was anointed or what do we call it when you get your divinity degree, whatever. What is that called? You can.
It probably varies by religious sect, right? You were either anointed or appointed or tapped.
I'm officially a reverend, but the fact that the reverend term is nobody uses that anymore. Everybody's a pastor now. You have to be the pastor. So once again, Pastor Brad, one night. In 2 nights in a row, I got my HVAC certification from the EPA, and then the next night I became a reverend. Now I'm a pastor. And do I know not a lot about religion? No, but I think sometimes if you know too much about something, you become bad at it. You know what I'm saying? You become like a nerd. You become to the point where you sort of lose the forest for the trees. And as my old boss said, I don't know who discovered the ocean, but it wasn't the effing fish. That phrase has served me well through my life, that sometimes when you get too close to it, you lose all perspective. You know what I'm saying?
Brad, just one favor. Just make them fishers of men. You know what I say? Teach a man to run the radio laptop for a day, and he can mess it up. Teach him to climb up a transmitter off Osage Ridge Road, and he can have a lifetime of electrocution.
John, I
love the ads today, Brad. Hey, looking for a workout? Don't go to the gym. Head to Dance Possess.
You want to do another one?
Yeah. Can I do one from 2023 that mysteriously disappeared?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, gals, your face is looking a little ragged. Holidays are coming up. Visit Simply Bella. Make your husband feel like you were still in your 30s when you cared about pleasing him. Call Simply Bella.
John.
You want to call them smile lines, but you really baked yourself in tanning beds through your 20s while you smoked Marlboros? No, come to Simply Bella.
Boy, will I hear from that client. Good thing they're not on the air anymore.
We'll cut that off the podcast. I love you, Shelly. I think they're one of your accounts. Shelly, I love you.
No, that was my account, believe it or not.
Oh, past tense. Okay, there we go.
Yeah, it was my account. They did not renew. So anyway, the end of our technical screw-up. Unfortunately, when we got off the air, you're going to hear a little silence. Then you're going to hear another Brad and John show, which is our film machine. We have, I don't know if you know this or not, John, but we have a backup system that when we lose the air feed from our main studio, it automatically goes to a backup feed, and right now I have old shows of our running. So what you're going to hear is you're not going to hear the news coming on next. You're going to hear about 30 seconds of dead air, and then you're going to hear Brad and John back in the air, but it's going to be an old show. And I'm going to try to fix things because they still broke, and I don't know what the hell's going on.
Hey, take your time, Brad. We got all the time in the world.
Okay, John, it's been good talking to you. Talk to you later.
Okay, see you tomorrow.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's Combest, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?